You're listening to the Cash Flow Academy podcast with Andy Tanner, your source for investing made easy. Here's Andy Tanner.
Welcome to the Cash Flow Academy podcast. This is Andy Tanner, your host. This is where investing is made simple. We always thank you for tuning in, and we really congratulate you for investing some time in your financial education. A lot of people give a lot of lip service to wanting to get better, but when people show up and actually listen, it really shows they're honest and sincere when they say, I'd like to learn more. So as always, our producers do such a great job with scheduling wonderful guests, and today is no exception. We have Joel Peterson, and his topic is very important. It's about trust. We're going to talk about leadership. He is the author of Entrepreneurial Leadership and also 10 Laws of Trust. His website is www.petersonpartners.com, and we'll learn a little bit more about Joel. But Joel, thank you for being on the Cash Flow Academy podcast. Thanks for showing up.
It's great to be with you, Andy.
This is going to be a big deal. How does a person, a little bit about your background, we can talk about JetBlue Airways, the Hoover Institution. Give us a little bit of your background and what made you want to write about entrepreneurial leadership and trust.
Well, I started my first business when I was 11 years old, and I've kind of been at it since then. I've done all kinds of jobs. I went to Harvard Business School. I worked for a real estate entrepreneur by the name of Trammell Crow for almost 2 decades. And then I started investing in other entrepreneurs and started another couple of businesses. And I taught entrepreneurship at Stanford for almost 3 decades. And there I really realized that many entrepreneurs have the energy, the innovation, the desire, and they may even know the rules, but they forget them. They get on what I call the mountainside, and the storm rolls in, and they forget, and they run into trouble. And so I thought, I'm going to write down a set of mindsets, checklists, ways to think about the fundamental issues that entrepreneurs run into. And I was going to call it running stuff. And HarperCollins, HCL, HarperCollins Leadership, said, well, if you call it running stuff, you'll attract joggers. So they wanted me to rename it Entrepreneurial Leadership, the art of launching new ventures, inspiring others, and running stuff. So I got running stuff in there.
That's fantastic. Now, your MBA is from Harvard. You went to Brigham Young University, which is kind of in my neck of the woods. Now, I'm a University of Utah guy, so I hope you don't hold that against me at all.
Enemy territory.
I was the worst basketball player in the history of that program, so I sat on the bench next to Coach Majerus. He would protect me from going in the game. But you've had a tremendous career, and when we talk about trust, it's interesting that people, when you think about Harvard Business School, you probably think about, well, he's going to learn about numbers and about processes and the importance of systems and all these things. But I'll tell you, trust is a fundamental, when I think of trust, at least in my small business, Joel, I think about how important it is in terms of it's an ingredient for things to function. And let me take us out of business. I have some family members who I love dearly, and I have a wonderful family member right now who's having a hard time marriage-wise. And the reason that marriage isn't functioning isn't because there isn't love. It's because he's not trustworthy. And it's interesting because you love a person regardless of what they do. Love's generally unconditional. But in order for a marriage to function, there has to be, I know what the Beatles were saying when they said love is all you need. Well, actually, no, you need more than love. If I can't trust my spouse, it doesn't matter how much I love them or how much they love me. In order for something to be functional, there's got to be trust. And if there's no trust, then we have what's called a dysfunctional relationship. Is that true for business as well?
Absolutely. Business is a partnership. It's a set of relationships. And fundamentally, you have to rely on others to deliver on promises. And if they don't deliver on promises, whether it be on time, on budget, providing the deliverables they said they would, your trust account goes down. Mm-hmm. And as the trust account goes down, people are less flexible, agreements are less durable, they are less innovative, the wheels start to fall off. And particularly when you get in a moment like this, where we're all struggling to make business work in this COVID era, you need trust more than anything. And you've got to reimagine your business. You have to recovenant with customers, suppliers, investors, lenders, and your own employees. And if the trust levels aren't there, you won't see your way through this. You can't develop it now. It's too late.
So, we might say that that to be a great leader, when I used to have a job, I had some great leaders and I had some great bosses that I just felt they would take a bullet for me. They were more my servant maybe than the leader. I felt like they were there to help me be successful. And I feel like my leader, I'll take a bullet for that guy because I feel that he has my best interest at heart. And when the leader has my best interest at heart, man, I'll take a bullet for that guy. But in today's world, man, Joel, it is tough to trust everybody. I mean, you mentioned COVID. Do I wear a mask? Do I not wear a mask? Are we getting information that do we really feel that the people in charge are competent or not competent? I mean, in order for me to trust you, a couple of things got to be there. I got to believe you're competent, that you know where we're going, that you know where we're leading, and number two, I got to believe you have my best interest in heart. How do we live in a world where trust seems broken? Could you give a little commentary on what you see in terms of trust out there?
Yeah, so I think you've mentioned two of the three things that are necessary for smart trust. One is character, which is this idea that a person would take a bullet for you, that they're a fiduciary for you. That's number one. But if they're not competent, you wouldn't trust somebody with high character to fly a 747 to London.
Right.
Character won't get it done. They have to also be competent. But the third thing you have to have is authority. You have to be empowered to deliver. So you couldn't fly a 747 to London if you weren't a captain for United Airlines or something, And so you have to have all three. And if you don't have all three, you shouldn't be trusted. If you do have all three, trust is a really powerful operating system, probably the most powerful operating system. But a lot of people rely on a kind of a pseudo-trust. And I think a lot of people in our day and age have learned to spin facts, to glide over things, to sort of create a good feeling, a fuzzy feeling. So there's a lot of feel-good sincerity that doesn't really make for trust. So real trust, you have to work at. And that's why I wrote this book called The 10 Laws of Trust, because I was trying to factor analyze what made up trust and then what are the laws that you can use to create a high trust culture. And HarperCollins published a second edition and asked me if I would add two things that people always asked about. And one of them was, how do you know the trust level in your organization? The boss never knows. They always thinks everybody trusts each other, but they never do.
Yeah.
And so we put in a diagnostic that you can answer and say, well, gosh, my trust level is medium, low, high, increasing, decreasing, whatever. And the second thing was, what do you do if you're betrayed? If you never trust, you'll never be betrayed. You won't have a very rich or complete life, but you won't experience betrayal. So, and if you do trust, you're eventually going to be betrayed by somebody.
Yes.
They're going to disappoint you. And so what do? Can you ever trust again? How do you overcome it? How do you recover, et cetera? So that book really addressed that sort of issue of trust. And I think there are ways to get better at it.
Let's talk
and
about.
So that was the idea.
Let's talk more about that because that really piques my interest. I and for me, my brain's so small. I mean, I always get intimidated talking to Harvard MBA guys because I was just trying to stay eligible to play basketball, Joel. That's it. I was just, I was trying to compete in those courses with you guys and just trying to stay alive.
What I tell people that have Harvard MBAs? I tell them it's okay. You can overcome it.
You can get reprogrammed. So let's move. Yeah. Sometimes it's been helpful for me as a teacher to sometimes move out of, if I'm teaching stocks or options or things that are complex, into things people already understand. And when it clicks an environment that already understand, then sometimes they can transfer that into a new area. So let's go into a situation. And I love this idea of once trust is broken, how is that regained? And I think all of us have had experience, whether you're a budding entrepreneur or where you're thinking about being an entrepreneur. We've all had familial relationships. We had a mom and a dad, maybe you have kids. And I just remember my son, I let him stay overnight with his cousin. They're 12 years old. So that's just like, that's a nightmare right there, right? He's away from home. He's with his cousin. And I know he has a golf cart. His dad golfs, and I know they have this golf cart. And I said, now listen, you can go and stay with your cousin. The only rule, and I just sealed my fate right here. Only thing you can't do is drive the golf cart, right? Don't be driving that thing around. So of course they take the golf cart and they take a turn too quick, and he gets thrown out and he messes up his arm a little bit. And now he can't play basketball. And he comes to me and we had a talk about this. And I says, this is what's really tough, son, is I gave you some leeway and said you can go to this. And you broke the trust. And the question we both wanted to figure out together is, okay, so now our job is now figure out how to rebuild this trust. And he all of a sudden found the difficulty of that quagmire is like, wow, how can Dad trust me again? We really used it as an opportunity to talk about how difficult it is. Because now if I say, son, if you tell me, if I let you go again, and you say, I won't go in the golf cart, and this time I really mean it. Well, you said that before. So could you tell us what insight and what have you learned about the reestablishment of trust, that once it's broken, how does that rebuild?
Yeah, so I always tell people it's one-way sticky. You build it up conversation at a time, and you can destroy it in what they call a New York minute. One violation, and you can destroy trust. So what I've found is if somebody disappoints you, don't let it fester. Go to them immediately and say, this really disappointed me. This hurt me. Let's talk about it. It may be that you didn't understand what I said. It may be that there was an intervening variable, but it may be that you just thought, well, I didn't really mean it or something. But we need to talk that through. And I would say address those immediately. There are a lot of people who let it fester. And then they get mad and they don't trust the person ever again. And what you want to do is you want to repair trust, and you have to do it in the moment. And as awkward as it may be, what you did with your son was really the smart thing. You can restore trust when you do that. There are certain kinds of trust that are very difficult to repair. And we could all guess what those are, but they're really tough. Somebody steals money from you, a spouse is unfaithful.
Right.
And there's a whole series of things that can be very difficult. I think in those cases, the most important thing you do is forgive. As awful as that seems, and it's for you as much as it is for the other party, but you can't be living in the past. Cortez, when he landed in Veracruz, he burned the ships. So people couldn't get back on the ships.
Yes.
You have to live in the future. And as long as you're climbing back on that ship, you're never going to live in the future. So I think forgiveness is the first thing. And I think the second thing is if it's that kind of a deal, when you have a violation of values, you need to move on. You just really need to, get out of business with the person, get out of life with the person. The only ones that are really difficult is when people have children. There may be enough that you say, boy, we're really going to suffer our way through this thing and figure out a new place. But that's kind of the exception.
As I listen to you speak and your perspective, I'd like to offer an insight to our listeners. The more I engage in my own small business and entrepreneurial efforts and even investment efforts, it just seems so much like a journey in personal development to me. And as I've listened to you, I heard three things. Number one is when trust is broken, there needs to be a conversation. It needs to be faced. And one of my favorite pastors, I guess you could call him a pastor, he's a man of the cloth, he's passed away now, was someone named Neil Maxwell. And he used to say, part of the burden of leadership is candor. Those can be difficult conversations to have. Pretty easy to let it slide rather than to just say, okay, we're going to have a very candid conversation. I was hurt. This was violated. Let's get this out in the open. That takes strength. That takes development. The second thing you said is this forgiveness idea of, I never have heard that story of burning the boats in terms of letting the past go in the idea of chronology, right? Hey, not going to go back, going to move forward. I'd always heard it in the context of giving yourself no other option to succeed. I love the idea of the chronology of that. Well, again, that's a personal development issue. Candor and also the strength it takes to forgive. Leadership's tough. The burdens of decisiveness, the burdens of making decisions, the burdens of forgiving, the burdens of candor. Have you found the same? You've done business. You have $1 billion investment management firm. You've worked with JetBlue. You're chairman. All this is that. And here you've written a book on trust. What is the role of personal development at large in leadership?
Well, I think in the end, leadership is about character. It's not necessarily about character in the good times, because if you have a product that is really doing well and you have a lot of cash flow and you can reward people, people will put up with a lot. But what happens is things don't always go well. Nothing is forever up and to the right. So when you're challenged, it's actually a function of character. What kind of relationship do you have with people? Do they trust you? Are you climbing the same peak? Are you belayed? Are you holding on to each other's ropes? Are you going to get through life together and have a meaningful relationship? This fellow, Stan McChrystal, who is the 4-star general who ran JSOC, he was on my board at JetBlue. And I remember asking him one time, what was the most meaningful thing about his extraordinary career? And he said, it's the soldiers with whom I worked. It's these Army Rangers and Navy SEALs. And it's those relationships are really what matters. And in the end, I think that's what leadership boils down to. These high trust relationships where you're holding each other's ropes, you're identifying the peak you're going to climb, and you help everybody get to the top.
I love this. This is such a great prism to look at our leaders, even not just entrepreneur leaders, but political leaders. If you say a person of character, but you also, we also mentioned, competence, and it's tough because maybe I love the idea of the McDonald's. They had a change in their leadership over a character issue, recently in the last year or so. They had a CEO that did some things that didn't represent the values, and they let him go. And to me, I went out and bought their stock because I thought, what? Some people might say, well, that's his own business. That's his own, he's going to compartmentalize that. Well, there's my business life and there's my personal life. But that's not the way McDonald's looked at it. And I went out and bought more stock. The stock fell on the news that they were having a change in leadership. I thought, no. And you look at Delta Airlines. He says, look, I'm not taking a salary right now. I know it's not much, but it's representative of how I feel, which I like to stay big picture, but let's talk about this. The airlines business from JetBlue, and COVID-19, that's about the worst thing you can think of to happen to an airline.
For sure.
Could you talk about the airline? I don't want to digress from the importance of the trust, but could you just give us some insight? Warren Buffett has dumped a lot of his airline stocks, which really surprised me.
He dumped them all.
He dumped
them all.
That's not his personality to do that, right? When you look at how he's invested in the past, when he's usually buying right now, right, when things are low. So I thought, wow, Warren Buffett's bailing on airlines. Could you give us some insight on that? How bad is it?
Well, first of all, so it's bad. So I'll say, first of all, we've lost 90 to 95% of our revenue. And there aren't very many businesses that can survive with that. Some of this is going to take a while to build back up. And so we have government help to get a bridge to that point in time. And then we've got to, reduce capital expenditures, cut operating costs, defer things, and be smart about running our business. And before that, we had to build a solid balance sheet and have the capacity to withstand some shocks. You mentioned personal integrity in that story about McDonald's, and I was thinking, when I factor analyzed trust, that was the number one rule for establishing a high trust organization. It was the integrity of the leader, and that is not compartmentalizing their life, having one set of values at business and another in their personal lives, and having a gap between what they say and what they do. So you can get integrity. So I'm actually bundling a second answer into this first question, but I think the airline business is tough, and we're all going to see our way through it. And I think the comment you made about the values of the leader, the character of the leader, is spot on for developing, a high trust culture.
As I look at this personally, I I get to participate in the podcast, but when you speak, I get to be a listener, just like everyone listening. I get to say, okay, what can I learn from this? And, that idea of gap was an interesting way to put this, because when it comes to competence, there might be a gap between ignorance and knowledge. And I certainly have those gaps. But I'll tell you, for me personally, the frustrations I have in my own life are the gaps between what I know I should do and my behavior. And it's always a battle. I have this part of me that's a very natural human person. And sometimes I look back and think, God, Andy, you knew better. This was not an ignorance problem you had. This was an implementation to implement what you know to bring your behavior in harmony with what you've learned so far. What a great conversation. This is just awesome. I mean, I'm always humbled because my producers, they find these, just incredible guests. I think they would never come talk to me. So I just have to appreciate you. The book is Entrepreneurial Leadership. And also the book is 10 Laws of Trust. And the way I love to promote my guests, because some people say, well, don't turn your podcast in for an infomercial. I disagree with that, because if I feel it's important enough to talk to a person, I mean, think about it. If you had the chance, everyone, to take Joel to dinner, Harvard MBA, ran companies that are just huge, $1 billion under management in his investment management firm. If you had a chance to take him to dinner and buy him a $100 steak at Ruth Chris, would you do it? Well, of course, but you're going to get much, much more than you ever could at that dinner by going to Amazon.com and investing in yourself by reading Entrepreneurial Leadership, and then pick up these 10 Laws of Trust. Because if there's 10 laws that I can learn to bring trust into my family, trust into my business, I certainly think that's a wonderful investment in your personal development. Joel,
thank you, Andy.
Let's think about this. So at the Cashflow Academy, what we try our best to do is to help people learn about some of the things they didn't learn about in school. Income statements, balance sheets, even in personal finance, many people in school never really understand how cash flow works, the relationship between assets and passive income. And so at the Cashflow Academy, that's what we try to do. And we say, look, whether you want to go into business or you want to try to buy some stocks or maybe become a real estate investor, there's personal development with this, there's strength to this, there's learning with this. If someone's listening right now and they want to be an entrepreneur, right? They want to solve problems and seek a profit by doing it, give value to the community. What would you tell someone that's on the fence right now in the middle of COVID-19, in the middle of all this stuff? Should they start a business right now? Should they go for it? Or what would your counsel be to the person who says, I'm really scared to start a business and take those risks? What would you tell them?
I'd say it's the best and the worst time ever to start a business. And it depends on having an idea that will satisfy a need that customers have at a value that's greater to them than it costs you to produce. And you've got to be able to delight customers, to attract employees, to have investors see that they can get a return on their capital, and you're balancing all of those elements. But it starts with saying, what does the marketplace need? You have to have an idea, but an idea is not a business. And so you have to convert that idea into something that actually generates a product or service that delights customers. And if you can do that, if you figure out something that will actually do that, and actually at moments like these when the world is upside down and there's a whole lot of new needs and things that need to be done that you can figure out. So I think it's a fantastic time to figure out something new because lots of things are broken. But it's also a really tough time to convince people to do new things. You know, they have to be, I'm thinking of capital providers are going to be a little bit nervous about it. So that's a little harder. But a lot of the great businesses of the world have been started at the depths. So I would not discourage anybody from doing it, but I would just say recognize that it's going to be a challenge too.
I agree. I've failed so many times in my life and struck out and missed so many baskets that I think failure for me, I've just kind of used to it. So starting a business for me, it's like, well, that didn't work. Well, we've been here before. I would like to say one more word about trust in since that's been our topic. I say right now, and I've said this on a couple of podcasts, I'm going to repeat it again. Right now, my feeling is your best asset, listeners, is not real estate, it's not business, it's not gold and silver, it's not stocks. Your best asset right now are the people in your life. It's your community, it's the people that you know, and of course, it's the people you can trust. When things go bad and when things get rough and the world looks like they're moving a little bit, they're a little less social and a little bit more primal. You get that fear going through your veins. People start to buy too much toilet paper. That's not obeying the Scout law of being, or the Scout motto of being prepared. That's primal fear, right? Take my piece of the pizza before other people get it. And when that primal behavior comes about because of fear, your greatest investment are the people around you that you can trust. And so with that idea and that theme, we just thank Joel Peterson just as genuinely as we possibly can for taking time from his schedule to talk to our listeners about this very important idea of trust. Again, the book is Entrepreneurial Leadership, 10 Laws of Trust. The website is www.petersonpartners.com. And with that, I thank you, sir. Thank you so much, Joel, for your insight, for your research, for your willingness to share what you've learned from an incredible career in business. We thank you for being on the Cashflow Academy podcast.
Well, thank you, Andy. Great to talk with you. Take care.
This has been the Cashflow Academy show, where investing's made simple. I'm your host, Andy Tanner, and we'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the Cashflow Academy podcast with Andy Tanner. For more information on investing made easy, go to thecashflowacademy.com.